There's so many years of my life where now I look back and I think, oh my God, so many of my problems would have been solved if back then I would have just had higher standards, because once I actually started having higher standards, truly everything in my life changed for the better. But also, it was a bumpy road to get here, because I think all of this is much easier said than done. And so today, let's talk about how to actually start having higher standards. As always, if you enjoy my content, feel free to support it in some way, such as liking, commenting, or subscribing. Your support really helps for me to continue to create these episodes. Our standards are what we accept and allow as experiences in our life, whether that is in friendships, relationships, work, how we show up for ourselves, all of life. And so if the standard or the bar is down here, we will accept and experience more things that are down here. And if the standard or the bar is up there, we will accept and experience more things that are up there. It's actually pretty simple. And that's why I feel like raising my standards changed so much in my life, because your standards truly affect every area of your life for the worse or for the better. When I look back at this journey of mine, I definitely went through a long time in my life where my standards were way too low for a long time, because I was really stuck in this loop where I was continuously accepting things and situations and behaviors from people that were just so far from what would make me happy, and it was making me miserable, really. But at the same time, when I think back to that version of me, I feel sorry that somehow I thought that that was all I deserved. But at the same time, for me, those times were not the worst part, because at that point, I was so stuck in whatever I was stuck in that I didn't even know or think about how great life could be if you would actually start having higher standards. For me, the worst part of it all was when I woke up to the reality of what was going on. It's when I started to realize, hold up, my standards are really low and I'm clearly tolerating things that I should not be tolerating, but also I have no idea how to get out of this mess. How do I stop enabling these situations in my life if I've been used to doing that for so long? For me, that was the worst part and the most confusing part, because now I was aware of the fact that I wanted to be a different version of myself who was living a different kind of life, but also I was stuck in a life that was so far from that. And I had no idea how to get out of this, what felt like a mess that I had created for myself. And for me, the biggest thing that helped me at that point and continues to help me until today is to understand that our standards, more than anything, are based on whatever we have been conditioned to accept. And I think unless we put that part into the equation, we will never be able to fully raise our standards in a way that is sustainable and actually changes the experiences that we have in life. So whenever you're at that point where you really want to start having higher standards than whatever you've had until now, and you're trying to work on that, but somehow, no matter how you try, you keep finding yourself in situations where you are accepting and tolerating things from people where you know you shouldn't be accepting this and you shouldn't be tolerating this, but somehow you don't understand why you keep doing that. I kind of look at it like this. Imagine someone starts giving you 1 drop of poison every day, and then it goes up to 2 a day, and then 3 a day, and then 10 a day. That's 10 situations where your standards are just way too low and you are accepting things that you should not be accepting. If you take those 10 drops of poison every day for long enough, at some point you won't taste how bad they really are anymore, because you get used to it. And maybe you don't even remember anymore how great life feels without those poison drops. And it's the same with standards. None of us wake up one day and because we went through one shitty thing, our standards go from super high to super low. That's never how it happens. It's a slow process. Enough things happen that lower our standards. And then at some point, even though those situations are shitty, they start to feel familiar and we get used to them. And that's why then in those moments, we don't have the capacity anymore to really feel that we don't want this and that we do deserve better and that we should walk away and that this is not okay, because in this weird way, we have become used to the taste of poison, really. But then let's say you go through a time where you don't taste that poison anymore for a while. And then once someone just gives you one drop, in that moment, you will immediately feel like, oh my God, what is this? This is awful because you're not used to it anymore. And that's why sometimes we look back at times in our life where our standards were way lower than where they are now. And we think, what was wrong with me? Like, why was I accepting these things? I wouldn't accept even just 1% of this in my life now. But whatever you were accepting was bad back then, and it would be bad now. The only difference is that now it no longer feels familiar and you are no longer used to it, which makes you see the poison for what it really is. Another thing that really helped me on this journey was to understand the connection between my standards and my gut feeling or my intuition, or rather to understand that the reason why my standards were so low was also because I was disconnected from my gut feeling or my intuition. You know, when you think back at times in your life or moments where it becomes clear to you that your standards were way too low and you are accepting things that you don't want to be accepting. And the first thought is like, why was I doing that? Like, what was wrong with me? But then for me, often the second thought is, I think I kind of knew. Like at some point, I think I had this weird thought or this weird feeling that maybe that was not a healthy friendship that I was in. Or at one point I had this gut feeling that I think this boss was just using me. Or once I was feeling really down after this one thing happened in my relationship. Like I think some part of me kind of felt it and I knew, but I just didn't trust that feeling, or I didn't listen to that voice, or maybe that voice was so quiet I could barely hear it. I think that's because our intuition and our gut feeling always knows, or I personally believe that we are connected to a part of us that is connected to God or the universe, and that part knows what we deserve and what we should not be accepting and what our standards should be. And so when we are connected to that part of us, we automatically have high standards without even having to think about it much. And so I think as we are trying to raise our standards, we can do all the research and watch the videos and listen to all the things that talk about the red flags to watch out for, what you shouldn't be accepting in relationships or friendships, or what a healthy friendship is and all of that. But I think at the end of the day, the most important part is to reconnect to our gut feeling and our intuition, because that part of us knows that innately. And so even now, I try to base my standards on what my gut feeling and my intuition is telling me. Is it telling me that I want to stay in this situation or not? Is it telling me that something is good for me or not? And to trust that feeling is so important, because you never want to base your standards on what that person in that video said, or that friend of yours said you should or should not accept, or society tells you what you should or should not accept, because it's your life really, and you get to set the bar wherever you want to set it. And I'm not talking about those unrealistic standards that are like, nothing and no one will ever be good enough for me, and so I'm going to set the standard up there. I'm just talking about those standards that are based in who you really are and what you know authentically you want to or not want to experience in your life. That is your choice to make, but I also think your intuition or your gut feeling knows that anyways.